Everybody knows where the exits are. Stand for pledge.
Flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Present.
Gary Sloan. Here. Brian Oswald. Michael Diedrich.
Here.
Mike Consol.
Here.
Patricia Duchesne. Here. Karen Van Lee. Here. Lenora Fries. And Jeff Holiday. Yeah.
We're going to be going into executive session. All right, can I have a motion to go into executive session? Aaron, second. Karen, all in favor?
Can I know the reason for going to executive session, please?
It was hiring of the principal.
Yeah.
And it was a disciplinary issue. All in favor? Opposed?
Hello again, everybody. There we go. All right. So you have a lot of policies on this particular agenda, some for second read, some for first read. So again, just as a reminder of where we are here, your mission. Again, we look at this as we go through these policies, your vision for where you want the district to go. And the purpose is to continue on this policy update and review your policy manual. So tonight for second reading, we presented on these last week. Your sexual harassment and sexual harassment complaint form are on here. Sexual harassment grievances under Title IX, school volunteers, student wellness, and school district records. As a reminder, the concept here with the sexual harassment is to collapse all of your sexual harassment policies into one set that covers everybody in the district. Students, staff, anybody who walks on campus. School volunteers updates puts it into two tiers, and there's a volunteer form for checking through. Student wellness, that policy has been under review well before I got here. The wellness committee was convened by John Rivers. He did a great job in having that group walk through this committee, so it went from policy to wellness committee, back to policy, and then to you for first read. And then student records is to update that as a required policy. So first reading tonight, most of the policies you see on here deal with special education. And partly that's because It looks like the last time the district undertook a special ed policy review was in 2003. 2003 to now, a lot has changed. There's a lot more required special education policies. So even some of the policies that you had as required policies need to be renumbered because it went 4321.1, 4321.2. The problem is that works until you get to 0.9. Now there's up to 0.13. So you have to go back and renumber some of them so that it's 4321.01, 02 until you get down to the double digits. I would guess you'd be good for another 25 years once that happens, because you got to get to 99. But one of the things that popped up last board meeting, you folks reviewed your evaluation of school board operational procedures. That's 0310. Given the fact that the board reviewed that policy at the last meeting, the policy committee took another look at it as well. The policy committee determined that there really was no need to change. But to reflect the fact that it's been reviewed by the board and reviewed by the policy committee, we recommend you re-adopt it so that the re-adoption date is 2025. So moving forward, people know that that policy at least is up to date as of 2025. No verbiage has changed in that policy at all. It just gives you like a time frame, so moving forward, you know that. The rest of the policies, a lot of them were renumbered, and I'm going to apologize because I want to do a little bit of reading on this because some of these policies get a little bit more detail-oriented than the last one. As you know, special education is bound by a lot of laws and regulations, so I want to make sure that we're clear on what's happening here. Your first one in this list is 4321. You have 4321 in your manual, but it was adopted in 2003. So what the new 4321 does is it reinstates the main parts of that policy and then updates them based on education law change over the past 22 years at this point. It was reviewed by the policy committee. This particular policy is anchored in federal statute under Individuals with Disability Act, Education Act, IDEA, and Article 89, which is the New York State education law that governs this. And it sets the basis for all of the other special education policies that you're going to first read on tonight. It keeps the main provisions, like I said, but it updates it to current policies. One of the things that we did with this is we included pupil services in the review of this, and one of the things that we wanted to make sure was that your policies aligned with your current practice. And the good news is your current practice actually outpace your current policy. So you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but you just don't have it anchored in policy and when you need it. So the next one is 4321.01. This one used to be called Allocation of Space for Special Education Programs and Services. Back in 2003, it was a time where districts were trying to bring special ed programming back into their building, but the concept of least restrictive environment wasn't an anchor at that point. So basically what they were saying is you need to make space for those BOCES programs back in the building. But it didn't really address the fact that you want to keep your special education students in what's called the least restrictive environment. So in other words, you want to run through what the actual disabilities are and place them according to the level they're at. Don't jump a level. So there's process involved there. And that's what least restrictive environment does for this. So it is your current practice in special education to do least restrictive environment. When you do the first read on this, you're going to see a set of policies at the end that you need to do a first read on to eliminate. In other words, right now, this particular policy is anchored in 4321.1. So if you don't vote to remove that, you're actually going to have two policies that govern the same issue, and you don't want to have that. This would be the updated one, and you'll vote out the other one. So that's 4321.01. 02. This is the school-wide pre-referral approaches and interventions. And this has gone through a series of changes over the past 20 years as well. It started out as, many people remember RTI, which is response to intervention. What they wanted to have districts do is run students through a whole bunch of interventions to see if those solved the problem before you declared that there was a disability for the student. That has since evolved into the multi-tiered system of supports / integrated. So it's become even more layered. So this has kind of gone through two adaptations since 2003. So that's what this is going to do. It'll anchor your current MTSS/I structure in your policy. Again, you're doing the practices, you just want them anchored in the policy. And for this one, you'll need to vote to remove 4321.2, which is the old policy that would be redundant with this one. Independent educational evaluations. This one you actually adopted in 2023, so it's pretty up to date. There's not a lot of changes in this policy other than we need to get it anchored in the right spot for the required numbers. So this would become 4321.04, and it used to be 4321.4. Really what you're doing is sliding the 0 in there to get the digits. And what this does is it outlines parental rights in terms of independent evaluations for their students. And it outlines rules, processes, and procedures, sets them up for the administration to set up those procedures. There's no change from your 2023. It's just, again, a renumbering for that one. And that's 4321.04. That one is actually not required. However, it puts some protections in for the district, whereas it states under what conditions you would not pay for an independent evaluation. So that's part of why you want to have that one. 4321.05, confidentiality and access to individualized education programs, individualized education services programs, and service plans. This also was adopted in 2003. It's also required. It sets up support for who can have access to the documents. And it also provides for people signing off on the IEPs when they review them, and that they understand that those documents are confidential. So they can't go sharing them, they can't keep paper copies, those kind of things. And there's a sign-off process for that. For this one, you'll need to vote to remove 4321.5, again, to not have redundant policies. 4321.06 is availability of alternative format instructional materials for students with disabilities. For example, if you have a student who has visual challenges, you need to be able to have enlarged font. You need to be able, or text to speech. In other words, an audio version for students who need that because their disability is with their vision. There's all sorts of other different things, but this would put into place a process where when you review textbooks, software, library books, new programs, new curriculum, one of the filters you want to put on that is they have a warehouse, basically, a clearinghouse, where you can go in and check those curriculum materials, because a lot of textbook companies and software companies have those alternative formats built into the program that you buy. So you want to put that as a filter when you're choosing your materials. Otherwise, you've got to manually change those for students who have those things and those conditions in their IEP. This one is also required, and currently there's nothing to renumber. You don't have this policy, because now we're getting up into where they stopped in 2003. So anything after this is a lot of them are going to be new policies. You'll need for that one you'll need to remove 4321.6. The next one, 4321.07, is district and statewide assessments of students with disabilities. This is one that came in after 2003, when state testing became really ramped up, and how you put in test accommodations for students. One of the big changes in this particular policy is you've got the ELA assessment, state assessment coming up, and one of your students was out skiing and they fell and they broke their wrist of their right hand. Now the principal actually can do what's called a medical 504 and assign a scribe to that student, because that student's not going to be able to write with the broken wrist. And it just kind of gives flexibility to the district for those short-term types of things that students may need. And it also sets up how the process for where you set up testing accommodations for your IEP students. 4321.08. This one also doesn't currently exist. It's the impartial hearing officer appointment and compensation. This is ruled by New York State Ed law. The process is you have a list of independent hearing officers. You have to go down in order and offer it to them. They decline. You go through the whole process. It's predicated on law, but when you get to a certain point, you have an independent hearing officer. You might have an independent hearing officer set up to come in and do a hearing. And if somebody cancels that hearing, you don't want to have to pay the full price of what that hearing would have been. So it says something to the effect of you will pay the going rate as set by the Office of Budget in New York State. But if you cancel the hearing within 3 days, you pay a $300 flat fee. You don't pay for everything else that the independent hearing officer might have, because they come from other parts of the state. And sometimes you're paying for travel, food, sometimes even lodging, depending on how many days they have to stay. It also puts in the provision if at the last minute the parent cancels that hearing, the district doesn't pay the hearing officer. So even though it's required, but it has some things in it that protect the district from a greater financial burden than you might have in those cancellations. 4321.11, this is public reporting on revisions to district policies, practices, and procedures upon the finding of significant disproportionality. Now, what that means is every year you put in your data to state ed. They run it through all sorts of formulas, and then they determine things like disproportionality. So, for example, they may say you are disproportionately suspending students with IEPs as compared to students in the general population. If you have that finding, then you've got to go and review your policies and procedures to find out why that's happening. But when you make changes to your policies and procedures, what this says is you have to put them out in public so that the public knows what you're doing to change that disproportionality. Does that make sense? I know that's kind of a convoluted process, but that's how it runs. Any questions on that one? Oh. 4321.12, timeout and physical restraints. This one you adopted in 2013 as 4321.6, and it needs to be, 4321.6 needs to be removed, as I said earlier, but this one you have to have. It just was the last of the requirements in 2003, so now it just gets bumped down. So it becomes 0.12. So we need to renumber it. And it also, the big change for this one is it applies to all students, not just students with IEPs. So if you do a restraint on a gen ed student, you have to go through the same process you would for a student with disabilities, how you contact the parent, what was done, that sort of thing. 4321.13, preschool students with disabilities. You adopted this in 2003 as 4321.2. So again, you'll have to vote to remove 4321.2 and 2R. And it reaffirms that you follow the commissioner's regs in these services for preschool students. So you set up your committee on preschool special education. You go out and search for preschoolers who might have disabilities. You have a whole process for that works in the background along with your CSD. So those are the policies for this evening. There's quite a few of them. I did list the ones that need to be removed. Unfortunately, I missed one when I sent them to NULA. So one of them in here, where did I put the note? 4321.4 is not on your agenda tonight, but we'll put it on the next agenda as a first read so that it gets covered by the end of the school year and it's removed as well. So again, all these policies have been reviewed by Pupil Services Department to ensure that they reflect your current practices. And again, the good news is your current practices are up to date. You just need each policies to the current practice. Next month and into June, we have a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 policies. When we get, some of them you already have, they're just in number in a weird way, they need to be re-anchored. But once we get through those 9, we will have covered all of the required policies that are out there, and you'll have all of your required policies in place. And then one other review I want to do is you have several fiscal policies, about 5 or 6 of them. those are ones you want to look at on a regular basis. So I'm going to work with your business official and his department, and we're going to look at those and then bring those to policy committee. One of them is actually Title I fiscal responsibility, which is numbered in an area of a required policy that we have to put in place anyway. So we have to find out where that gets numbered. So I'll check with the school boards to find that out. It may not require any change in policy, but it's going to require a change in numbering. So we're getting through a lot, folks. There's a lot of material to cover, but I'm comfortable that we will definitely get to all the required policies by the end of this school year.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions, folks? Okay.
Thank you.
Pop it open here.
Yep.
Cool. So this is our last budget presentation before the public hearing. So it's really, nothing has really changed since our last meeting, which is great. So I'm really going to dive into it because the decision has to be made. We need to vote. We need to vote tonight. It's technically due tomorrow, so if we don't vote tonight, then we have to reconvene tomorrow to make a decision. So our, like I said, that's what our calendar shows. So we've been working on this a long time. We actually started over a month earlier than we did last school year, which was great, and it really put us in a great position to for this school year. So the big question is 2% or 2.5%, right? That's the big question. This entire budget cycle, my recommendation has been a 2% increase on the tax levy until the last meeting. And what happened at the last meeting was when we had a grant meeting and we learned about our Title IV funds and how we might not be getting those Title IV funds, might not be getting our rollover Title IV funds through our Stronger Connections grant. It sort of just shifted what we were thinking. Because that Stronger Connections grant pays for approximately 4 staff members a year. We have 4 salaries that are sort of tied up in there. And if we're not going to get all those funds next school year, we're just looking at how would that affect our programming. So, by going at a higher tax levy, we'd be able to preserve that. Or, through reserve funds. And I think that was a recommendation that we had made to the board, was looking at those reserve funds, which is great. So remember, this budget, we are very proud of this budget. It still, holds on all the priorities that we had set. It keeps programming at the level that it's at. Lowering the use of our fund balance, which has been a goal of ours for the last, ever since I've been here, which has been 4 years. So it's lowering, our reliance on that fund balance, because once again, when they presented to us about our long-range fiscal plan, they showed that, if we continue using our fund balance at this rate, in potentially 5 years, we could be bankrupt, so not using those funds. Preserving all the staff that we currently have, adjusting our programming slightly, just to hit on some mandates that we're not hitting on right now, which is great, still doing our field trips, and all of our, maintaining our levels, or even possibly increasing some areas for athletics, music and drama, and clubs for after school. So keeping all those intact. Which I think is important to say right now, because people are going to start seeing just in New York State, this, these next couple of weeks as other schools start adopting what their budget is, we're seeing massive cuts in positions in schools. One of our neighboring school district, they announced they're cutting 12 positions. Another neighboring school district, 38 positions. A lot of school districts going over the 2% tax cap. Right? These are unprecedented times when it comes to finances. And over the last few years, just sort of how we've been managing our budget here has put us in a really good spot to where we're not cutting any positions, we're not going at the maximum tax levy, and we're sustaining that high level programming. So I think it's very important to highlight those pieces that we've been working on. Some of these budget drivers that really, we really struggled with this year was that massive increase to health insurance, with a 16% increase in health insurance costs. I mean, that's really, that took a lot. transportation increases, which, our new contract through transportation is, it will increase through the CPI number, which this year we got the final number being 2.8%. But another thing is to remember is that as our population is shifting in Catskill, we have to become less reliant on that title funding, right? We already had a decrease this year of our Title I funds, right? We have less, the easiest way to put it is we have less poor people in our community, right? When I came to this district 4 years ago, we were 68% of our school body was below the poverty line, right? And right now we're at about 53%. So you talk about in 3 years, this massive decrease of our student population living below the poverty line. We're still above 50%, which is high, but those funds are linked to that. So if our population trends continues this way, our reliance on our title funds has to go down because we won't be receiving as much title funds. Yeah. So grant updates, I already spoke about this. We got our numbers for our Title I funds. Like I said, it was a decrease of about $12,000 this school year. 611, 619 are our special ed funds. Those were pretty much right around the same numbers. I just spoke about the stronger connections piece. Like I said, not sure how that's going to end, and we will not know until either August or September what those are going to be. So it's one of those things that we have to keep in the back of our minds and just pay attention to, but we won't know that exact number until that time of year because that's when they release those numbers to us. Like I said, some of those highlights I want to make sure I hit. No reduction in faculty and staff. We are adding transportation for pre-K students, which I think is a huge win. So our youngest learners will have transportation, and what we're hoping for with adding that transportation piece for pre-K is that we're going to be adding a 4th section of pre-K. The reason why we wrote here the potential of a 4th section is because that really doesn't come out of our general fund. We have a grant through New York State for pre-K, but that's based on number of students enrolled. So that won't come out of the general fund as long as we have enough students to run that classroom. For the most part, most of the funds that run that classroom will come out of a grant, which we already have the funds for. We can't access all the funds just because we don't have enough students to access all those funds. So hopefully with the increase of transportation, we can access all those funds. No loss to extracurricular activities, which is great. All student programming remains the same, and we are adding in the additional 1 E&L teacher. So other school districts are cutting staff, and we're adding staff, which, like I said, in this time frame is great. The last few years being extremely fiscally responsible, with the sunset of the ARP funds, right, the ARPA funds from COVID, a lot of school districts, I think that's where some of their struggles are coming in right now, is you got an influx of tons of money, and they were using those for positions, where when that money's gone, where's the money coming from to fund those positions? What we had done here, at least over the last 2 years, is we used those funds, a good chunk of those funds were actually used to purchase our new curriculum at our elementary school. So we really look at how can we support our students in the learning inside the classrooms through curriculum and supports that way instead of people in positions. So it was just a different way of looking at it that really played out in our favor, which is great. The other piece before I get into the 2% to 5%. What I want to just make sure everyone knows is no matter which choice you make tonight, it's not going to change what I said. Everything that I said, this is going to happen, right? It's not going to be oh my God, we took the 2% instead of the 2.5%, and now we're not getting this, right? That's not going to happen. The difference is going to be, as I'll get into it later, is really where those funds coming from within our budget, and it's really the only way that could potentially affect us is long term, right? If approximately a 0.5%, it's right around $100,000. So you take that, you compound that over years. What does that $100,000 turn into? Over the next couple of years, not knowing what the fiscal strains are going to be on school districts. There is the probability that over the next 2 to 3 years that there's going to be fiscal strains in the school district. The probability is high, but that no one truly knows. So looking at it, we've shared this slide. So what does this do to a taxpayer? So if you're, for a $200,000 home in Catskill, if you go at a 2% tax levy, that's an annual increase of approximately $42.15 a year, which breaks down to $3.51 per month. Or if we go out at the 2.5% tax levy, that's $52.60 per year, or the $4.38 per month. So that's what it would, if your home is assessed at $200,000, that's approximately how it would affect your taxes. And then here, once again, the highlighted sections is the only thing that would change. So the middle section, if you look at the highlighted lines, the middle column is the 2% tax levy. And what does that do for the applied reserves? If you just look, we'd be using more applied reserves than if we went out at the 2.5%. If we went at the 2.5%, we would be using less applied reserves to balance our budget. So if you take a step back into what we did over the summertime, is we really looked at where we were at with our fund balance and going to what the state recommends at 4% of fund balance. We adjusted that to get to our 4% by heavily funding our reserve systems. But part of funding your reserve systems is money has to be going in and out. You just can't have money sitting in these pots just sitting there. So this is us as a district using our reserves properly, which is we're gonna be pulling money out, using those reserves, and then potentially putting them back in if they weren't needed, or if we use less of it, or whatever that ends up being. So that's really what we're looking at here. And then if you look at our fund balance number, which is below the second highlighted line, you'll see the decrease in the amount of fund balance that we are allocating to this budget, which once again, that's something that we have to continue to work on, is not relying on fund balance to balance our budget. It was something that for years here, the district has been relying on that fund balance to fund programming, but we really have to continue to chip away at utilizing that fund balance. We really need that in case of an emergency, right? That's really why that money's there, and using it that proper way will go a long way. So keeping that in the back of mind, I think this budget does that. This budget does that. So like I said, that's really it, because nothing else has changed. Everything else has been the same for the past three board meetings. Like I said, we worked really hard, really looking at the numbers really tightly. The come up, our percentage increase of really spending is 0.38% for next school year, which is great. I mean, we really, like I said, really sharpened our pencils, really dove in, looked at everything line by line. Where can we save some funds without impacting the program? And we were able to do that. And in all retrospect, we were able to do that really 2 years in a row. Right, so 2 years in a row, we really were able to do that for the school district, which is great. And then it's our balanced budget. So, the slide really says questions, but really the question that I have for the board is the decision on what that tax levy looks like. You have a question, Mary?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So in the beginning slides, when you said you were ready to say 2%, until you weren't sure we were or were not getting which funds?
So the Stronger Connections grant, we learned, we did not know this, or we overlooked it. It's tied to Title IV funding. So we did not know that. We just thought it was a grant from New York State that we had won. We didn't think it was like the federal funds. So then once we learned that, the conversation is that when we were awarded the grant was supposed to be rewarded for 3 school years. What ended up happening was the government never gave us access to those dollars year 1. So what they said was the money that you were supposed to get for year 1, you were allowed to roll that over to the following years. So when we did that, we were able to have that support another position in the school district for 2 additional years. Now what they're saying is, listen, the money that you have written in your grant, you're going to get, but that rollover money, we can't guarantee it. So that rollover money that we should have been able to use year 1, but the government never gave us access to, that ended up rolling over, we might not have access to that, and we won't know if we're going to have access to it until August, September, October, sometime in there. So we are looking at it as we're not going to get access to that. So adding the 0.5%, which is around $100,000, to cover a position that's built into that grant.
So whatever we vote on,
Yep.
if the state budget is passed, like say next week, we can't change that.
Can't change
It has to be stay the way, even if it would impact.
But that wouldn't impact it because that's not coming from the state. Because that's
No, but any money.
no, it's locked in.
Okay.
We're locked in.
And I I'd like to know from the business office, what their take is on the 2 or the 2.5 and why.
Well, it's really not up to us to give our opinion, that's really your decision. The reason that we supported Dr. Wilson's recommendation for 2.5%, that really works out to about $100,000 in the budget for next year. With the uncertainty of what may happen to title grants, we just don't know. We feel that that revenue would position the district better to support programs moving forward. One of the things that Dr. Wilson did point out, and I'm happy that he did, was we did increase the applied reserve amount, by several $100,000 this year. I mean, we did that for a reason, but specifically that money there was a kind of a residual payment from state school conduct from many years ago. The long and short of it is money moving in and out of that account. We feel we're well positioned, there to hedge against the ERS and CRS increases, which will pull money from those reserves. We'll pull money from the capital reserve for those who will show that movement, which we're supposed to do while keeping our unrestricted fund balance under 4%. So when this came about, we did get a little, I don't want to say nervous is the right word, but it is, a little concerned. We want to position ourselves, or we would have to cut positions late term, and we could weather the storm, so to speak. And I will also say that this is a tight budget. I know we can hear that a lot, but the rollover budget was about $1.8 million in the first flush that we did a couple months ago. Now that was at 13-14% projected increased cost for healthcare. It turned out to be over 16%. So that added about another $150,000 into that pot. So what we did was we took a hard look, with Dr. Wilson's direction in the business office at matching up what our actuals have been over the last 2 to 3 years, to align with actually what we're spending. So this is a really tight budget with not a lot of, fluffing, not that they should ever have it, but this doesn't have it. So that extra $100,000, I think is a wise decision. That's just my opinion, but I also understand that times are hard and money's money for families, so it's really a decision for board education.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks to you and to your office for this budget.
I have Patrick sitting next to me. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him. He's been working hard in transportation, and Matt, the treasurer, is a brilliant guy, and it's really good.
Well, you're welcome.
And everybody else, yes. I want to.
Any other questions? Okay, so when we get to later in the meeting, you guys will have to make a motion to choose an amount for the tax levy and vote on it, because the property tax cap report card is what gets approved. That we need to send to New York State. The only other thing before I end my report is, I know we want to do a little, I guess we call it a celebration or recognition vote. I know we have the Catskill Parent Music Association. We'll call them up later on, but I know they reached out to me a couple months ago, right? And they're going to be donating a bassoon to the school district, which is great. So it's an instrument that not every school has. So I just think it's expensive. I never realized how expensive they were. I think when Lenny told me, I was like, oh, okay, there we go. But it's well worth it, and they're purchasing it. We're agreeing for the upkeep and the maintenance on it. So I know that's coming up later, and we'll do something later on. But I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up now. So I just think it's another great opportunity to continue to expand on the music program here at Catskill.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great.
And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. All right, so moving on to board action discussion items. Board of Education hereby accepts the agenda as presented. Amended. Huh? Yeah, amended. Yeah, as amended. Can I get a motion? Mr. Rizzo, second. Council, all in favor? We're gonna do the walk around. The board, having met in executive session in relation to an appeal from the decision of the superintendent regarding the suspension of a student, and after review of the parent argument and each board member having reviewed the record, it is resolved that the findings and assessment of punishment by the superintendent are hereby upheld, except that the student's suspension time is reduced and the student will be returning on Monday, April 28th. Can I have a motion? Karen, second. And council, all in favor? Opposed? Okay. Carried. Administrative budget for 25-26 fiscal year resolved that the Board of Cooperative Educational Services of Rensselaer, Columbia, and Greene Counties is authorized to expand the sum set forth in the 25-26 tentative administrative budget document in amount of $7,461,009. All in favor? Motion. Mary, second.
I'll second.
Joe? Favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 25-26 Quest Guard 3 election ballot and administrative budget ballot for meeting held on April 22nd, 2025 for Catskill Central School District. Election of members of the Rensselaer, Columbia, Greene Counties Board of Cooperative Educational Services. There are 4 incumbent nominees for 4 BOCES expiring 4-term positions. Each component district is entitled to 1 vote for each position to be filled. Please indicate the number for and against votes. Resolved that the Board of Education casts its vote for the election of Mr. Edmund Brooks, Columbia County, New York, District Residence, Ichabod Crane Central School District, as a member of the Board of Cooperative Educational Services for the Rensselaer, Columbia, and Greene Counties. You got a motion? Aaron, second. Mary, all in favor? Opposed? Resolved that the Board of Education casts its vote for the election of Mr. David Finch, Greene County, New York, Resident District, Greenville Central School District, as a member of the Board of Cooperative Educational Services for Rensselaer, Columbia, and Greene Counties. Can I have a motion? Mike, second. Rizzo, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Resolved that the Board of Education casts its vote for the election of Ms. Nadine Gozzola, Columbia County District Resident, Catskill Central School District, as a member of the Board of Cooperative Educational Services for Rensselaer, Columbia, and Greene Counties. Motion. Joe Rizzo, second. Karen, all in favor? Opposed? Last, the Board of Education casts its vote for the election of Ms. Melanie Spock, Columbia County, New York District Resident of Chatham Central School District, as a member of the Board of Education, or Board of Cooperative Educational Services for Rensselaer, Columbia, and Greene Counties. Motion. Mary, second. Karen, all in favor? Opposed? Get all out?
Yep.
just to help everyone understand, so the tax report card that's presented today is for 2.5. So Mike, he will call, and then if you do not want to do the 2.5, we will vote no. And then if we need to add on, modify it for the other one, we can do so.
Property tax report card, whereas the Board of Education of the Central School District of Catskill, New York, Greene County desires to adopt the property tax report card to accompany the annual school district budget for fiscal year 25-26, and whereas the property tax report card required by section 16087, 1716 sub 7, and 2601 sub A3 of the education law. So that would be a motion to do the 2.5% tax up. Do I have a motion for that? Mary, do I have a second? No, so it didn't carry. So then we were going to refer to,
Would you ask them?
so do a second, but do we have a motion for the 2%? Michael Council, a second, Karen Manley. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Motion carried. Approval of Greene County Sheriff's Office SRO agreement. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves an intermunicipal agreement between the Catskill School District and the Greene County Sheriff's Office for one school resource officer for the 2025-2026 school year. Be it further resolved that the superintendent is hereby authorized to sign such agreement on the board's behalf. Have a motion. Karen, second. Oh, I'm sorry. Adam. Walmart. Okay, second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Approval of municipal law intermunicipal agreement. Whereas 4 BOCES, Onondaga, Portland, Madison, BOCES, Albany, Schenectady, Saratoga BOCES, Madison, Oneida BOCES, and Broome, Tioga BOCES have collaborated and entered into an Article 5 General Municipal Law intermunicipal agreement for the purposes of improving vendor management and data security and privacy practices for school districts and/or BOCES statewide, known as the One Risk Operations Center, ROC. Whereas the Board of Education of the Catskill Central School District, through its affiliation with a locally based regional information center, participates with the ROC and desires that for the 24-25 fiscal year to authorize the ROC to enter into data privacy agreements and related exhibits, DPAs, with vendors and third-party contractors that include the requirements of and compliance with New York State Education Law, Section 2D and Part 121 regulations, collectively Education Law 2D, related to student personally identifiable information and certain teacher and principal APPR data. Whereas the ROC also partners with NYSEG, the Access for Learning Student Data Privacy Consortium, and the Education Cooperative to negotiate and approve Education Law 2D compliant DPAs. Whereas the DPAs are presented to school districts and/or BOCES for final execution and do not require the expenditure of funds beyond those budgeted. And be it resolved, Board of Education, Catskill School District authorizes the attorneys designated by the ROC to negotiate and approve of DPAs for software and technology resources. And be it further resolved, Catskill School School District Board of Education grants the ROC and its designated attorneys the authority to negotiate the terms and conditions of DPAs and take such action as to effectuate the purposes and intent of this resolution.
Did you read that again?
I hope everybody heard it. Like read War and Peace.
Basically, our data. Narrow it down a bit.
Okay.
Good job.
Motion. Aaron, second. Anybody? Please. All in favor? Opposed? Seven, approval of advanced therapy agreement for occupational and physical therapy services for 24-25. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the agreement between Catskill Central School District and Advanced Therapy for Occupational and Physical Therapy Services effective September 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. We have a motion? Mike, second. Mary, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Approval of external auditor engagement of Bonadio and Company LLP. Be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby approves the engagement of Bonadio and Company LLP for the external audit for the year ending June 30th, 2026. A motion from council, second from Lizelle. What's that? Okay, in favor? Opposed? Be it resolved that the board hereby accepts the first reading of revised added policies. Be it resolved that the board hereby accepts the first reading of the following policies. 0310, evaluation of school board operational procedures. 4321, programs for students with disabilities under Article 89. 4321.01, provision of special education services in the least restrictive environment. 4321.02, school-wide pre-referral approaches and interventions. 4321.04, independent education evaluations. 4321.05, confidentiality and access to IEP programs, individualized education services and service plans. 4321.06, availability of alternative format instructional materials for students with disabilities. 4321.07, district and statewide assessments of students with disabilities. 4321.08, impartial hearing officer appointment and compensation. 4321.11, public reporting on revisions to district policies, practices, and procedures on a finding of significant disproportionality. 4321.12, timeout and physical restraints for all students. 4321.13, preschool students with disabilities. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the first readings to eliminate the following policies. 4321.1, allocation of space for special education programs and services. 4321.2, preschool special education. 4321.2R, preschool special education regulation. 4321.5, programs for students with disabilities under IDEA and Article 89 regulations. 4321.6, use of physical restraints. Motion. Patty, second. Mary, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Second reading and adoption of revised added policies. Be it resolved that the board hereby accepts the first reading of the following policies. 0110, sexual harassment and sexual harassment complaint form. 0111 sexual harassment grievances under Title IX. 4533 school volunteers. 5405 student wellness. And 1120 and 1120R school district records. Have a motion? Mary, second. Patty, favor? Opposed? Carried. Acceptance of a donation from Adams. Be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby approves a donation of $50 gift card from Adams Berraker Farms for the Catskill room at Catskill Elementary School. I have a motion to accept the donation. Mary, second. Karen, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Acceptance of donation from the Catskill Tree Council and the CES Student Council. Be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby approves the donation of a tree worth $450 to be planted at the Arbor Day celebration. Motion, Karen, second. Patty, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Acceptance of an anonymous donation. Be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby approves the donation of $100 to be used towards the Catskill Middle School History Club end of the year building bash. A motion. Mike, second. Karen, all in favor? Opposed?
No.
Acceptance of donation from Catskill Music Parents Student Association. Be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby approves the donation of a bassoon worth $5,789 to Catskill Central School District. Do I have a motion to accept that donation? Karen, second. Patty, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Very good. Very good. Yes, it's that.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education approves personnel.
All right.
Board of Education approves personnel agenda items 1 through 6. The resignation of assistant coach, a leave of absence, an administrative appointment for a secondary principal, James Dedana, who was not able to stick around due to a prior engagement, was not here. Forgive me, most likely to say Lily Pepperly. Monitor, Amanda Lyons, varsity softball volunteer, Shannon LaChance, the chaperone, Daniel White, production accompanist, and substitute list addition, Reagan Schnilligan. Sorry about that. Have a motion? Motion. Bueller. Patty. Second. Karen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Approval of agreement. Be resolved that the superintendent and board president are authorized to sign a supplemental memorandum of agreement extending the probationary period term of employee number 2281 for a 12-month period through June 30th, 2026, as recommended by the superintendent. Motion? the board reports.
Like the report we're recording.
That's good.
No streaming.
There is a.
I would just like to, as a chairman of the audit committee, like to thank the business office for their fine work on the budget. I know that we did not vote for the 2.5% budget, but we did vote for the 2% budget, which in my opinion is the right thing to do. It shows that we are slowly starting to cut back on what taxpayers have to pay for the school district, and also to recognize all the hard work that the teachers, the students, the administration, and everybody involved with running this school has done in the past 2 years. And I commend all of them. Thank you very much.
Any other reports?
I just wanted to mention, we're researching attorneys. We narrowed it down to 2. Called many references, gotten all good references on both attorneys. We met with another one tonight, so that's in progress. We don't have an official committee on that, but I just wanted to let you know. Also, I have 2 other motions that I wanted to present. I'll do that now or later. First one was at one of our executive sessions, I'd like to do an exit interview with Mr. Martin before he leaves us at the end of the school year. And I don't know if that needs to be agreed upon, how that works. And also, the second motion is for the board to do an investigation for one of the employees and their family who has been presenting many times to this board, just to get more information about that case in particular, and that be done as soon as possible. And that's all.
We have to go executive session? Oh, sorry.
Before we bring up the student donation, I'd be remiss also, I don't invite everyone to the Arbor Day presentation on Friday, this Friday, in front of the superintendent's office. It'll be the 3rd year that the student government and the Catskill Tree Council. We're going to be planting another tree. We've been replacing the maple trees that were rotted out that we took down, I believe it was 2 years ago now at this point. So it'll be the 3rd year in a row. It's a nice celebration. Elementary school student council, they'll be there. I don't remember, did you do a song last year, Maggie?
I did.
Are we doing one this year?
I helped Barbara organize it because we didn't miss one this weekend.
Oh.
So I'll be in Kingston at the festival, but some of the students will be.
So some of the students will be here, so please come.
When is it?
Friday at 3:45. Friday at 3:45. It's like I said, it's a nice celebration. In front of the superintendent's office. Yeah, we're slowly replacing the maple trees that were cut down due to their condition.
It's Earth Day.
It is Earth Day, so it's sort of fitting, isn't it?
Yeah, very good. Very good.
And then before we leave, I would like to bring up Maggie, the elementary school music teacher, and anyone else. I see Sarah, I see Lenny, anyone else who wants to come up. Thank you guys for the bassoon. I think you had something you wanted to say.
Do. Thank you, first of all. This was a big one for us. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Len Signoretti, and I am the proud papa of 6 kids. 2 graduated, 4 still in the Catskill Central School District. My youngest is 8. She's in 2nd grade. But anyway, instrumental music education in schools is valuable because it cultivates creativity, enhances cognitive skills, promotes social and emotional development, and fosters a sense of community. It also improves focus, memory, mathematics, abilities, and provides an outlet for self-expression and stress relief. Learning to play an instrument engages various brain regions simultaneously, boosting memory, attention, and problem-solving skills. Instrumental music encourages teamwork, communication, self-expression, fostering social skills and emotional intelligence. Playing instruments develop fine motor skills, dexterity and coordination, while also nurturing creative thinking and imagination. The commitment to practice and performance cultivates discipline, responsibility, and perseverance from as early as elementary school through middle school, high school, and beyond. Members of the Catskill School Board, Superintendent Dr. Wilson, Secretary Newell, I'm here today on behalf of the Catskill Music Parents Student Association, CMPSA, and Bonnie's Fund, Catskill High School Class of 1974, to donate a bassoon to the Catskill Central School District. The Catskill High School Class of 1974 was very generous to give back to their alma mater, knowing of the need for instruments to make the music department stand out and be the best that they can be. With this donation of the bassoon in the amount of $5,789, it is our hope that the music department can teach our students the endless possibilities that music can provide without the harsh burden of having to purchase an instrument. Many students go without learning an instrument or may choose a different instrument simply because of the lack of not having that specific instrument. Well, this time it's a bassoon. The Bonnie Fund is changing that for the Catskill Central School District. It is very fitting that the first instrument chosen to be purchased is a bassoon. Catskill High School Class of 1974 named their gift to us after one of their own classmates, Bonnie Carney Turpin, who was a bassoonist herself. Even our own elementary school teacher, Maggie Giglio, is a bassoonist too. So we gave her the opportunity of choosing the right bassoon that was a perfect fit for our students. So with that said, please accept this gift that we present to you now. The music department has agreed to take on the responsibility of this bassoon and any future instruments that will be purchased through the Bonnie Fund with the recommendation of CMPSA. Thank you for your time. I also want to thank Bobby D'Agostino from John Keel Music Store up in Albany for helping us and providing us with all the information to select this bassoon and to purchase this fine instrument. We know a very excited elementary student who is ready and eager to play this bassoon. And when we heard that a couple of months ago at a CMPSA meeting, when our music teacher, Michelle Stewart, says, I think there's a student that Maggie has that wants to learn the bassoon, there was nothing that we needed to do. We just had to get that bassoon. And to this student, whom Maggie just told me is taking his first lesson tomorrow, and all the future students that choose to play this bassoon, we wish you all the very best. Learning how to hold it up correctly, buzzing through the reed to make a sound, learning and the fingerings, the notes, and how to first make a melody, and then making the sweet sounds of bassoon music. We will be there next year at the holiday concert, looking for that bassoon and listening for those sweet sounds, or maybe, just maybe, we'll have our first bassoon soloist at the NISBA convention next year. Thank you all. Cats can, cats will.
so hard to get some keys. And thank you so much for this generous donation.
Thank
This
you.
is absolutely incredible.
No, not me.
I'd like to recognize that now we are recording our meetings so that they can be shown on YouTube. So we finally have got to that point, and I appreciate all the work that's being done, and especially cooperation from the board and from the public and from the students. We are now going to be transmitting our meetings over YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen, you had a motion or a resolution or something? No?
And we don't have any. Yeah, so we don't have anything for a second executive session. All right. Wow. Is there a motion to adjourn? So is a second. Aaron Van Lee. Adjourn.